Today I'm going to talk extensively about my recent time with Path of Exile. This is very much my journey as a new player, and I'm going to take you guys through that journey, step by step if you will, occasionally stopping to digress a little bit, talk in a little bit more detail about the things that I've come to really love and enjoy about Path of Exile. What has quickly become one of my all-time favorite action RPGs, and I think what will undoubtedly go down is one of my favorite games. There's still so much I haven't done in Path of Exile yet, and that within itself is a part of why I'm enjoying this game so much and why I've fallen so hard for it. So hard for a game that just 4 weeks ago, I didn't even think I'd be playing. So why don't we start there at the beginning? And let me make it clear that this is a video that should hopefully appeal to everyone. I think there's something to be said here for those of you who are veterans of Path of Exile and maybe want to see the perspective of somebody making their way into the game for the first time proper. And if you're a new player who's maybe never heard of Path of Exile or who has tried it in the past, maybe multiple times like I did, and never really had it stick for you, maybe this video will help you go on the necessary steps to maybe have it stick for you, or at least to put yourself in a position where you can give Path the best possible shot to see if it's a game that you would actually enjoy. If you could get past all of the typical barriers for entry like I finally did, maybe there's something there that you would fall in love with. So let's go back to the beginning. How the hell did I get started with Path of Exile? I've actually played this game here and there, going back to its earliest launch into early access. I never really got far, maybe like an hour in, which isn't much, especially when you consider how much I probably struggled to make my way into the game. Like many people, I saw that big skill tree, didn't know what the hell I wasn't doing, and didn't really bother to do any research, didn't bother to educate myself, just decided to jump in, and so many times got spit right back out. Now that I've played like 50 hours of the game, I totally understand why that was, but that was me. Just kind of like, all right, let's keep giving this a shot and we'll see where things go. Now there was a point about 2 months ago that I was like, you know what, I want to play this game again. And I'm very fortunate on a personal level. I have a great entry point because I have a group of friends. We all hang out in Discord together just about, every day. Whenever we have time, we play games together. And many of those friends are really big Poe players. They've got thousands of hours, and they're always right there, waiting to, sort of take you by the hand and say, come to the world of Path of Exile with us. We'll help you. And the great thing is that they're all going to do it in a way where they're not going to just shove like one set way of playing the game down your throat. They're going to be there to be that guiding hand. And that's exactly what most people need when they play Path. And I've always had that. I've just never really taken advantage of it. So again, a few months back, gave it a shot, didn't even like the beginning of it. Just, all right, no, I'm done. ExileCon happens just a few weeks ago. Path of Exile 2 announcement, 4.0, 3.9 announcement. For me personally, aesthetic matters a lot. And I'm not saying Path of Exile is an ugly game. I don't think it is at all. I think it actually has a really wonderful aesthetic. There's a lot of different inspirations. I'd say there's quite a few gothic inspirations. And I think in a lot of ways, the team at Grinding Gear Games has really done their best to try and to create their own fantasy world, right? To sort of break the mold as much as they possibly can to kind of go their own way, while obviously including a lot of the things we've come to expect from fantasy RPGs, skeletons, giant spiders, etc. etc. So it's not as if the game isn't nice to look at and it isn't fun to walk your way through. But I would say for the average user, at the beginning of the game, there's not a whole lot there. And if you watch footage of the game, there's not a whole lot there from a visual standpoint to really grab you and be like, wow, damn. So if you're someone who is looking for something that looks like, Vermintide or God of War or something like that, you're not really going to get that here, right? And so I think that was, in some ways, a little bit of a barrier for entry for me. The animations don't exactly look crazy fleshed out because half the time things are happening at the speed of light because this is a game about speed and efficiency, and that was definitely a turn off for me. I think I'm usually more into games with deliberate animations, deliberate attack systems, games that aren't necessarily about min-maxing your character's animations to the point where they don't even exist and things are just shooting out of your character's body. That was a big one for me, no doubt about it. So when I saw the footage at ExileCon, I think that like did a little bit to kind of be like, all right, you know, maybe this is the right time to come play this game. We're gonna have these visual improvements. They're doing like physically based rendering with some of their foliage and some of their environment work. Like, I like the camera being pulled out. That was always a complaint I had with the game. The camera's too zoomed in. Not really that big of a deal, but it kind of was. And so, you know, it just felt like the right point to give this one more shot. And so I dove in, this time really looking to educate myself, to gain access to the necessary information and knowledge to actually play the game. And what I found was that you can sit there all day long and try and run characters to level 10 to level 20 with minimal guidance and think that you're going to get an idea of what it's like to play the different classes, when in reality you're not, because of the way the passive tree and the gem system works in Path of Exile. Individual classes don't really have a whole lot going on other than the ascendancies tied to them and where they start on the actual passive tree. You're not gonna just like equip the ranger and suddenly know what the ranger is capable of. You're not even gonna be able to experience really 1/10, 1/100th of its potential build opportunities in that like initial starting zone. You really have to go into the game, do your research, get a build that someone else has made that functions well, that is beginner friendly in my case, that is user friendly for someone who doesn't have many hours in the game, who doesn't have a bunch of these resources already sitting in their stash, and then you're going to follow that build. My initial thought process with this, and a big part of why I found myself turned off by this idea, was that I like to do things on my own. When I play games, I like to figure them out. I don't like to go running right to a walkthrough or a guide. I like to figure it out as much as I possibly can. And most games these days, you can figure out. Like, yeah, it'll take some time, but there's not many games where you're going to hit like a wall where it's like, I literally can't figure this out on my own time. Like, it's going to be impossible. Path of Exile is actually one of those games. So I think if you're someone, a new player who goes into this saying, like, if I can't do it all on my own, I'm not going to do it at all because you're worried you're going to have some portion of the experience ruined for you, let me help you here. That is not what happened at all. When I finally followed a guide, there was zero loss of satisfaction. If anything, I gained satisfaction tenfold. Path of Exile is simply not a game where you're going to be able to just wing it. You could sit there all day and do a bunch of research and watch a bunch of other people make builds and look at a bunch of other builds and try to make your own build, and maybe you'd make something that functions, but you'd probably be running along a path that is very similar to someone else's build they've already established. This isn't a game where you're going to jump in and instantly have a sense of mastery for everything that's happened, even if you've read up on it or watched videos. You need to experience it for yourself. You need to learn by doing. Like the first time somebody might show you how to make a roux when you're cooking. Like, it doesn't matter that you watch someone else do that or that you followed a guide step by step. There is still a deep satisfaction to actually understanding that system, that mechanic of cooking, and doing it for yourself. And then you can move forward and integrate that into the sauces you make, into the soups and stews you make. And suddenly it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for your skill as a chef, as a home cook, whatever that might be. Path of Exile is that. There was so much about the game that I didn't know. There is still so much about the game I don't know, but following someone else's build, as far as I possibly could, allowed me to learn so much about how the game functions, how it works, and why it works the way it works, if you will. Why the game is the way it is. Why did GGG make these systems the way they've made them? A huge part of the game will suddenly just click for you. It doesn't mean you're going to go off and start doing your own builds the next day, but there's a huge sense of reward and satisfaction from just gaining access to that knowledge. Again, you're learning something. You're being taught something. While there are a lot of ARPGs, a lot of loot experiences out there, loot shooters, loot RPGs, where loot really is like the primary driving force of satisfaction. You're constantly chasing that carrot, that Skinner box, if you will, right? This is the first time I've played a game of this style where loot is obviously a big part of the experience, where loot was not even in the top 10 of things that had gotten me hooked on the game in its early phases. Like, loot, great, yeah. I've maybe thought about loot like once or twice since I've started playing Path. I'm gonna level 70 Shadow Assassin build that I have now, and I'm rarely ever thinking about loot. Do I occasionally go and do one of the blights when I see Cassia and, like, you know, hopefully I get some uniques out of this? Yeah, but, like, it's just not integral to my personal experience yet. I'm still learning the game, and that learning is what has made the game so satisfying and so rewarding, so addictive, if you will, on top of, obviously, a lot of the systems that I've been learning about. It's a very different type of fun factor. Not one that I expected from this sort of a game, and I think not one that many people are going to expect. Again, a lot of people, I think, are going to try and just, like, they're going to try and just brute force it, and they're never going to get that sense of learning. They're never going to experience that learning process because they're not allowing anyone else to teach them anything. So you got to let your guard down here. You got to accept the fact that you don't have the answers, and that even if you had some of those answers, it's better to let somebody give you a helping hand. And that helping hand in this case is to follow a build guide. So I actually started with a ranger build, and I had a massive failure with said build. Considering how close we are to the end of this league and the beginning of, you know, the new content, the new league, the new season and all that stuff, I was a little hesitant about, like, having to do multiple characters, and so it took me a while to decide on one build after I started researching builds. I had some recommendations from friends, and I kind of just went through a bunch of things, and I decided I was going to do a Scourge Shot Ranger build. Like, this is the one I'm going to do. I think is the Pathfinder Ascendancy, and I start doing it, and I had blown off a few key notes in the individual's build guide, specifically a note that said not beginner friendly. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, it's like difficult, like, you know, you're gonna have to press a lot of buttons. No, as it turns out, people usually say you will have to press a lot of buttons when you have to press a lot of buttons. What they meant was it required a lot of resources and gear that a new player was unlikely to have access to or a way to obtain. Expensive pieces of gear even that were going to allow that build to perform at its peak. Not even at its peak, but at eventually a point where it would just become unusable if you didn't have that gear. And so I hit 56 on my Ranger after like 30 hours of making my way through the story, and I just hit this wall where I was like, God, this character sucks. Like, this build sucks. The build doesn't suck, though. And I very quickly realized, like, it's nothing to do with the build. It's my gear. I don't have the gear that I need to make this build function because this is a charge shot ability. I need cast speed big time, and I don't have it, and I don't really have a way to get it. And so I bailed. It was like, literally, it took me 3 minutes to make that decision because I realized I had reached a point with Path where I just enjoyed the process of leveling a character already. I was not even concerned about having to play through that content again because I knew at this point I could run through it faster, and that I was going to go off and try another build and find something that clicked with me more because, honestly, even if the Ranger build was performing well, I didn't enjoy the gameplay. I didn't really enjoy the bow side of it like I thought I would. I always wanted to play bow characters in the RPGs, and I never ended up enjoying them, but I gave it a shot anyway. And, you know, it was actually like a relief to walk away from that, to look at that as a lesson and say, okay, there's so many things that matter to a build in this game. I was thinking of it in a very, like, one-dimensional way when there's like a million dimensions when it comes to builds. And so I went off and I started looking again. I went back to the Shadow. This was a character, a class that I had messed around a little bit with in terms of looking at builds and doing some research, saw some videos, and I remembered specifically messing around with Cobra Lash and being like, I really like that ability. I like it as a ranged ability. I like the effect of it. I like the way it works. It feels satisfying to use even on small groups of mobs in the early game. So it's something I'm going to enjoy leveling with. Let's see what build options there are there. And I ended up on, again, this Shadow Assassin Cobra Lash build that I've absolutely fallen in love with, and within itself has been this huge learning lesson. This is the build that allowed me to understand just how crazy support gems can be. Like, I've got support gems in this build that essentially allow other gems, active abilities, to be automatically triggered when I take damage. And if that's not the coolest fucking thing ever, I don't know what is. But when I realized that that's how those things worked, I was like, dude, this game just keeps adding on the layers just when I think I've kind of got it figured out. There's 5 or 6 more layers. Like, boom, actually you can do this and you could do that. And you're like, wow, okay, I see where the depth is in this game. I see why people have 5,000 hours in an ARPG that has not been around for that long. It's been around for a while, but man, 5,000 hours, like, I get it now. I totally get it. So that failure for me, like, totally, you know, just butchering that Ranger build, was the point at which I started to fall in love with Path of Exile. And then it was like making my way through this Shadow Assassin, getting the necessary gems, starting to learn more about the game and just understanding how things work, getting better at navigating the maps. And I made it to level 70 last night. And I made it there in half the amount of time it took me to make it to level 56 on my Ranger. Obviously the build was better because I was able to gear it out and equip it earlier. I was able to get some gear with some friends, which was really helpful. Again, this is why I think a huge part of this game is playing with others who play it. Not saying you couldn't do it solo, but you're definitely going to have a better time if you accept that guiding hand. If you have access to it, if you have the privilege of that guiding hand like I did, it's going to be a lot easier to get in this game, which is why all of my friends who are like hearing me go on and on about this game, I'm like, dude, don't try and solo it if you don't have to. Like, come on over, hang out with a bunch of us who are playing, and let's go through this together. It's very much a social experience, and I think new players can benefit massively from that. So that's the turning point, right? That's the point at which I really fall head over heels for this game. And for me personally, once I'm really enjoying a game, a lot of the other systems and the obvious design goals that the developers had that are now shining through become really apparent to me. And I can't help but think about those things and say to myself, dude, this is so fucking cool. I love that they did this. So why don't we talk about a few of those things? Because I think they do a good job of highlighting the bits and pieces of Path that I really enjoy and that I think any new player is going to enjoy once they get past that barrier for entry. So we talked about builds. No doubt about that, right? This is a game where player choice is everything. And when you see pictures or clips of it in a video of that ridiculous skill tree, it's not as ridiculous as you think. And much like everything in this game, it has a very specifically designed purpose, right? Each class starts somewhere on that skill tree, but you are free to gain access to any of the nodes on that skill tree, obviously, as long as you have enough passive points to reach that point within a reasonable amount of build. You wouldn't want to just waste all your points running all the way across the tree just to get to one side to gain access to one thing. However, you might have a build that is pathed out. Path of Exile. Path of Building is the name of a third-party application that people use because you are literally pathing your build. And you're making sure that it goes to all the necessary nodes, the key, big passive bonuses, while also picking up all these smaller boosts to things like dexterity and strength and intelligence along the way. The tree actually makes a lot of sense, and while it may look like this spider webbing mess, it is a huge part of that player freedom, the ability to really make these unique and specialized builds by tapping into as many parts of the tree as possible to bring that build together. It's really a game where complexity, the idea of the game being hyper complex, is something that really does exist at face value. And while you're always going to have another step where you need to learn something else and learn something else, nothing here is presented in a way where it feels unnecessarily poorly explained. I guess is the best way to be put. And I'd like to make some comparisons to Warframe, because I think Warframe has a similar focus in its obsession with min-maxing speed and efficiency versus everything else, right? In Warframe, you want to kill stuff as fast as you can. In Path of Exile, you want to kill stuff as fast as you can. While I think they both have a reasonable amount of depth and complexity, I think Path actually does a much better job in presenting itself. I have found, as somebody who has several hundred hours in Warframe, that it was a lot easier to learn about Path through videos and guides and posts on the forums and everywhere else in the internet, because the things that were there just made sense as someone who had played RPGs before. There were systems in place that didn't feel like they had been arbitrarily renamed or made to appear as if they were something else when really they were something that you're probably familiar with from games you've played in the past. So I think that's a big part of it. Path does actually present itself really well if you're willing to educate yourself a little bit, to do a little bit of research. And honestly, you don't need to do that much. I've asked questions from the people that I play with who have played the game, but it's not as if I've been over here just asking questions every 5 minutes. A lot of it's okay, here's a little barrier I've hit. Let me go talk to them about it. They can usually explain it within 5 to 10 minutes, if not less. So I think while there is complexity here, it's learnable. And the curve isn't nearly as steep as you might think it is, as long as you're willing to go to those outside resources to learn a little bit more about the game, to get that guiding hand. Again, this is a learning experience. Let someone assist in educating you. Now, on top of the passive tree, we obviously have the gems, which I kind of already, talked about, my love for the gem system. there's just so much going on there, so much variation, and I'm really excited for the massive overhaul to gems in Path of Exile 2, which is going to happen sometimes a year beyond, but the idea that everything's going to be 6-linked. So links in gear are a big part of how players make builds, because support gems need to be linked with a primary attack gem in order to support said gem. Like I said earlier, I've got active abilities that are automatically triggered by the support gems that I have linked to them. So that means when I take damage, that gem now activates automatically. I don't have to manually skill press it anymore. And that's a big part of, this specific build. So the more gems you can link together, essentially the more possibilities you have for builds. And in PoE 2, we're going to be able to potentially run more than one primary attack. But I think right now, while that stuff looks more readable, that actually makes this a great point to try to get into the game, because the one thing you can really quickly understand right from the get-go is that you need to pick one key ability. In this case, that's my Cobra Lash. That's my right mouse click, right? That's my primary. Everything else is essentially built around attacking with that. And once you start to understand that, again, the game gets a little bit easier. You can see I'm kind of talking you through my own personal learning process. It was a matter of understanding why the way things are the way they are. And once I started to grasp that, things started to fall in place, right? It's like you start to draw the lines and you make the connection and you say, oh, okay, that's why people really only run one primary build and why I don't need to have 3 of these abilities. It just doesn't make sense with the way armor and gems and the link system works in this game. It's a tree of learning. You start at the bottom, you grab a root, you follow it up to the next root, it branches off, you follow that, and before you know, things make a hell of a lot more sense than they did before. So, let's talk a little bit about what it's like to play Path. How does it feel to play this game? Because obviously the feeling part of the experience, running around killing stuff, is a big part of any game. And as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, this was the part of Path that drew me in the least. I even had friends when I was at level 30. I'm leveling with my buddy Sam on my Ranger. We were doing, I don't think I was 30. I was higher than that. We were already doing my Ascendancy thing for the first time, and he was running me through the lab. And he's like, oh man, it's got to kill you to just watch these animations that get cut short that are just they're so fast, because you like games, with lots of animation work and stuff like that. And to an extent, that's true. He's 100% on point. But I do play a lot of games that are classic and retro, and to me, it's just all about the presentation, right? It doesn't really matter how rich the animations are, how many frames there are in an animation. It's just how does the thing present itself? And when you look at a game like Path of Exile and then compare it to other ARPGs in the market, specifically a game like Lost Ark that I was really enamored with and I've been wanting to play, yeah, it's just, you just come to the conclusion of I just don't like that as much as I like that. But I'll say this, once you actually play Path, none of that matters. I have fallen so deeply in love with this game's combat system because it doesn't care about those boundaries. Because it's not really that concerned with getting clean animations out. It's more this min-maxer's, dream, if you will. It is speed and efficiency versus deliberate invisible, I guess is the best way I would put it, right? Everything is just about how fast can I attack so I can do maximum damage to the maximum number of mobs, and how fast I can then clear this map or this area. And I like that. There's not really a limit to the rate at which you can make a build kill stuff, and that's probably one of the best things about this game. I'm not saying that they couldn't do work to tune the animations to maybe have animations that run short when you have increased attack speed. Sure, that stuff could be all great, but at the end of the day, I don't care anymore. It was a part of the game that I had to be sold on, and now that I've played it and just went and obliterated massive groups of mobs with my Shadow Assassin, my build over here, I just don't care anymore. I'm no, it just works. This game, it's visceral. It feels satisfying. Yes, it looks quick and ridiculous. It is not deliberate and slow, but I'm so okay with that. In fact, I got into the Russian version of Lost Ark and played it for 4 hours on one character and was this doesn't feel nearly as satisfying as Path. So it really proves you can have the shiniest animations in the world and most fluid animations in the world and particle effects all over the place. It doesn't instantly make your game fun to play. And that's a hell of a thing. Path does it really well, actually. I think beyond that, beyond the killing stuff, there's this really great sense of scale in Path of Exile. And when I say scale, I mean I'm not talking about the size of the maps. I mean just the sense of scale in the world, your personal existence in Path, you feel like there is so much you can do, so much you can reach for. And the best part about that is that that's not just a feeling, that is actually the way Path is. I've been looking into the endgame quite a bit more now that I've been making my way to the end of the story, talking with other Path players about it, watching lots of videos on it. And one thing has been made very clear to me. There's a lot of different types of endgame content, and one character will necessarily never be able to be optimized for all of those pieces of content. You're going to have people who are really great at running labs. You're going to have people who build characters just for like bosses in certain types of missions. Like, people can really hyper specialize to the point where certain things like crafting on the higher end, people actually build up a reputation for crafting so they can craft cool shit for other people because they have access to crafting blueprints that other people don't. You have people who will run people through labs as like hard carries, just killing everything, being these absolute murder monsters because it's not that easy to specialize for that sort of thing. And again, I'm going to say it again. If that's not the coolest fucking thing ever, I don't know what is. I love the idea of social experiences in RPGs where players can really develop themselves as an individual who performs a task that not many other people can do. Knowing that that exists in Path makes my experience as some average schmuck just trying to make his way through the campaign before the end of the league, it makes it better. It honestly does, because it expands that sense of what the world of Path is, as it is populated by actual players. I love that sort of thing. It's my favorite thing about online games. And when I was younger, way back early days, like N64, moving into like the original Xbox and the PlayStation, thinking about, these shared world ideas like, oh, dude, wouldn't it be so cool to play this game with like hundreds of people, right? Then the MMO comes along and I'm playing World of Warcraft, and it's like, it's kind of that. And then having that taken even a step further, it reminds me of the stories I always hear from people, looking back at games like the original Guild Wars. And, Star Wars Galaxies, these old MMOs where it was like, dude, you could just be a bard and you just play music for people and they'd give you money. Like, there's this huge social economy, trading and job system that is 100%, yes, in-game developed by the developers, but it exists in the way it does because of how the players then deal with those systems. And that's just really freaking awesome. And again, speaking of market and economy, beyond people providing services, it's the same thing with items in this game. And I was just talking with a friend about Diablo 3's auction house because it was terrible. It's like the worst part of the game. It meant that people just went out and just like traded items, and there just wasn't enough variety in the items. There wasn't enough rarity in Diablo's items, especially not in the early days when the auction house was there. Trading felt terrible. And I think myself and many others, when we think about trading in games, I just immediately default to it not being the best thing. Like, the majority of the time, it sucks. It's not implemented in a way where it adds any value to the game. Just playing Path and seeing sort of like the early stages of value behind certain items, certain uniques, pieces of gears, etc., and then seeing the massive community behind it, it's very clear that this is an economy much like Warframe's that like functions pretty well on its own. Like, the developers set out the standards, the base of everything, and then the players decide what's worth what based on like the meta and what works best for certain builds. And that's really wicked cool. It definitely kind of like pulls me back in the other direction of like more games should have trading. I just hope it's implemented as well and works as well as it does in Path. And I think a lot of that has to do with the variety and the diversity that is available in Path of Exile when it comes to builds and the many different things that can exist on a piece of gear when it drops, the links and the slots and all the prefixes and suffixes and all of those different things, right? They mean that there's this huge pool of variety. So people are always chasing like that next best thing. And when you have a meta that shifts with the leagues and the expansions and the updates, then, that economy constantly stays fresh. It is definitely something that is really fun to look at, that I am slightly terrified of getting into, but also really excited to get into when the time comes. There's just a lot of really cool stuff in Path of Exile. That's the best way I can put it. And I have a friend, my buddy Iniquity over there, who I've been trying to get into this game, and I just keep sending him like videos like, dude, this game, just look at this. This is amazing. This is so cool. I've fallen head over heels for this game. It is, I don't want to say because I've only got like 50 hours and there's going to be a bunch of people like, you only played for 50 hours, but that's a long time, man. And I would say honestly that if I stop playing this game tomorrow for some reason, the time that I've spent specifically with my Shadow now and like the learning experience I've had, this is hands down one of the best ARPGs I've ever played. I wasn't really into like Diablo 2 and stuff like that. I didn't get to experience that, you know, nostalgic grandeur so many people did. So this for me is like, this is so much better than Diablo 3. Like, I love what's here. And that's not, I enjoyed my time with Diablo 3, but I just like the depth here. I like that social aspect. I like that sense of a real world ran by actual people. You know, the things that happen because there's actual players doing these things, and they create a population of players that interact with one another, and it's its own little thing, right? I think you should check it out. And like I said earlier on, I know I've highlighted, I think, quite a few times in this video, ways in which I think you should go about getting into the game if you're a new player. Obviously, if you have friends or people who are willing to help you, that's great. The best thing you can honestly do, though, is to just get on out there, find a guide that is, you know, well rated over on the official forums. Do yourself a favor, stick to the official forums for guides. I think that's a great place to search. You can pretty much search for anything. You'll see a bunch of different guides, and they'll all be focused around that primary attack ability. Go look that ability up. Look at a video of it. See if you like the way it looks. Maybe if it's an early gem and you can get your hands on it, play a character to level 10, pick up that gem, go kill some stuff, and then follow that build through. Just keep following it. Do research when needed, and I think you'll find very quickly that a lot of the Path of Exile experience will unfold for you as you turn each page. And each page is like a lesson. I've made so many lessons and educational references in this video. All of the teachers I know are going to be very happy. So let's leave it at that. There's so much more I could say about my time with Path, but it's a game that has really surprised me. You know, 3 weeks ago, I did not expect to be in this position. If you would have told me 3 weeks ago that I'd be waking up every single day thinking about Path, coming home from work, thinking about playing Path, wanting to level my character, getting excited about the next season already, the next expansion, like starting another character, like, well, I'm loving the Shadow, you know, when the fresh league comes about, yeah, I'm going to make another character, especially for the beginning of it, get that character past the main story and then mess around with both of them, you know, in some of the end game activities, start to make my way into the very expansive end game, learn more about the game along the way. There's just so much here to fall in love with. It's just going to take a little bit of effort. And I think, honestly, that's exactly what I was looking for at this point in time in my personal gaming life. So I think if you're looking for something that requires a little bit of effort, a little bit of focus, a game where you can honestly put aside anything else you've been playing and feel like you want to dedicate all your time to just this one thing, Path could absolutely be that for you. It totally could. Thank you guys so much for watching. I feel like it's hard to say goodbye. It's been so long since I made a video. I'm hoping I can have one every single month for you guys now, but like it's been like 2 months since I last made a video, so like I'm bad at goodbyes when I haven't seen someone in a while. You know, the long goodbye thing. We're doing it right now. It's already been way too long. You'd be kicking me out of the doorway, telling me to go home. So I'm gonna go home. But thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.